He broke into the car and began to drive away, but the car lurched to a sudden stop, and the doors locked on their own, trapping him inside, while hidden cameras recorded him as he started to panic. You see, police had previously placed valuable items in the back and left the keys inside, all to tempt someone to steal it. As they drove away, officers pressed a button that disabled the car, leaving the thief locked inside until officers pulled up to arrest him, and the footage from the hidden cameras became evidence in court, leading to dozens of convictions. Now, these traps did help cut down car thefts in some areas, but some believe that it isn't fair, saying police are tricking people into stealing. The farmer would clip the glasses over the bird's beak, and the colored glass would make everything look red. You see, if a chicken sees blood on another bird, it could start pecking at it. And if it doesn't stop, it can actually peck the other chicken to death. In the crowded coops, this would stress out the other birds, and soon they would start turning on each other as well, pulling out feathers and pecking viciously. But if they were wearing the colored glasses, then everything would look red, meaning they couldn't make out the blood and were less likely to start pecking in the first place. Millions of these glasses were fitted onto chickens across America until farmers just started cutting off their beaks instead. She took the knife to her pregnant belly and started to cut out her baby. You see, she lived too far away from a hospital, and when she went into labor at home, the baby just wouldn't come out. After 12 hours of painful labor, she drank 3 glasses of hard liquor and grabbed a knife. It took her 3 tries to cut through until she finally pulled out the baby. After cutting the umbilical cord, she wrapped a sweater around her wound, then sent her other son for help. A medic stitched her up with a needle and thread, then took her to the hospital, where she and the baby made a full recovery. He built the Lego bricks around his arm stump when he was just 9 years old, hoping to create a prosthetic arm. You see, in the womb, his right arm never fully developed. But as he grew up, he started playing with Legos until he made his first Lego arm. Now, that first version didn't work, but he tried again years later, making an arm with a movable elbow and a grabber to pick things up. Since then, he's made 4 more versions, each one better than the last. And because he shared the plans for free, anyone can now build a Lego arm. How fast would you need to pull to keep everything in place? Well, when you pull the cloth normally, friction grabs the objects on top and tries to drag them with it. But if your table is perfectly smooth, you yank fast enough, and the weight is stronger than the friction, it will keep them still while the cloth slips out from underneath. Now, the further the cloth has to travel, the more friction it creates, meaning for a full 16-seat table, you would have to attach a long rope to a rally car and hit the gas. And once the tablecloth was pulled at 100 miles per hour, it would leave everything where it belongs. They release the thread as the wind lifts them up thousands of feet higher than a skyscraper. You see, when spiders hatch from their sacs, there's not enough food nearby to feed all of them, so they climb upwards to test the wind with their front legs. And as the silk leaves their body, it catches onto wind and electricity in the air, which can carry them across entire oceans. But during the flight, they risk being eaten by birds, and one wrong landing could mean they vanish into the sea. They didn't hear the roof groaning under their weight. You see, they had climbed up to get a better view of the game. More and more people joined them while the roof below strained, until the middle gave out. They dropped through beams and metal, and some landed on a huge furnace filled with molten glass. Others fell on the floor, trapped under the rubble. A pipe above them broke, causing scalding hot oil to pour out, and some had ignited as it rained down, setting the group on fire. In the end, 23 people died just because they wanted a better view. The boy fired a shot at the black bear, wounding it. But when they tracked it down, it charged at them out of nowhere, The father fired 8 shots at it, but he missed every single one and the bear pinned him to the ground, mauling his face and arms. He tried to defend himself, but it was too strong. Then the boy pulled the trigger, killing it with a single shot. The father was rushed to the hospital, but he survived thanks to his son. He left to sell cattle, but never came back. For years, his family searched tirelessly, and thinking he died, they even held memorials for him. But 30 years later, he suddenly reappeared, wearing the same exact clothes and holding the train ticket from the day he went missing. He couldn't remember anything from when he was gone and insisted that he was home all along. Now, some think he was kidnapped by aliens, while others think the government took him for secret testing, but to this day, no one knows where he was for those 30 years. If your key breaks in your lock, take a toothbrush and snap the head off with pliers. Then hold a lighter a few inches away to melt the tip. And when it's soft, press it against the edge of the broken key. This lets the plastic slowly fuse with the metal. Once it hardens, you can lightly wiggle the toothbrush, pulling it back out to rescue your key. If you press your finger onto a mirror and the reflection lines up perfectly tip to tip, it means that there's a thin metallic coating right on front of the glass. And since the room is brightly lit, the coating bounces light back at you, looking like a normal mirror. But on the other side, the room is completely dark, allowing the mirror to look transparent from that side, meaning someone could watch everything you do while you only see your own reflection. Just remember, if there's a tiny gap between your nail and the reflection, it's likely a normal mirror, but if they touch tip to tip, leave. They wheeled him in to harvest his organs, but he started to move. You see, they said he was brain dead after an overdose and prepped him for organ donation. But he started moaning, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Now, some doctors refused to go through with it, but the organ team allegedly still wanted to continue. In the end, the surgery was called off, and the man thankfully survived. If you dump a giant ice cube in a volcano, could you stop an eruption? Well, a single volcano releases millions of tons of lava, which burns at over 2,000 degrees. To cool it instantly, you would need to freeze Lake Michigan, rip it out of the ground, and throw it in the volcano. But instead of stopping the eruption, the ice would just vaporize on contact. This would expand rapidly, building pressure inside the volcano, and violent explosions would blast out superheated steam and molten rocks for miles, causing more damage than the eruption itself. 2 rods are fixed together. Then the first rod spins slowly around the center. And as they turn together, the tip of the second rod draws a line in space, spinning pi times faster than the first rod. Now, if pi were a normal fraction, that line would loop around and eventually return to its starting point. But since the digits go on forever without repeating, the line never closes. Instead, each new loop just barely misses the old one, since pi never repeats. And it just keeps twisting into new shapes, never repeating the same trajectory twice. As they pulled into the garage and the door was closing, 2 masked men slipped inside. They forced the parents into the trunk at gunpoint before driving away. Finally, they stopped the car and demanded the couple's bank cards and codes before shutting them back in the trunk and abandoning them. The woman knew they could die in there, so she desperately pulled at the cables in the trunk, hoping it would do something. Finally, she noticed a small metal cable, and when her husband pulled it, they heard a click. The trunk door opened, and after they escaped, she started a campaign, which is why every car now has a glow-in-the-dark release lever inside the trunk. He stepped onto the scaffold when a cable snapped, and the whole thing suddenly collapsed. It fell over 500 feet, but the man held on, riding the platform like a surfboard through the air. An updraft between the buildings slowed his fall just a little, and when the scaffold hit the ground, he was thrown off, landing on a pile of cables. He had 10 shattered bones, collapsed lungs, and clots in his brain. But somehow he was still alive. Doctors replaced all his blood twice, and he needed 16 surgeries. But eventually, he learned to walk again. While sweeping, he tilted his hand over a truck's fuel tank, dropping in a handful of dirt, which ended up breaking the engine. And no one ever suspected him because he acted stupid. You see, he was captured during the Vietnam War, and instead of fighting back, he just pretended to be dumb. He acted like he couldn't read or understand orders, convincing the guards that he wasn't smart enough to cause trouble. But behind that act, he memorized the names of over 250 prisoners, and he even learned the exact location of the camp by watching closely when guards took him into town for fake glasses fittings. When he was finally released, he went back to the US and told them all the information he gathered, which ended up saving hundreds of prisoners. They installed jacks and rollers under the building, while people were still working inside. Then the huge building rolled slowly along a curved set of rails, and each time it moved off one roller, another one was placed in front. Hand-turned jacks were used to move the building along, as well as a steam-powered engine. And extra-long phone cables were installed so the business could keep running. The building pivoted, moving 15 inches per hour, so slow that the people inside didn't even feel it. And after 30 days, the building had rotated 90 degrees and moved 100 feet to its new place. The kids were happily doodling when the man dangled a shiny star in front of them, explaining that they would get one for each picture they drew. As the days passed, they stopped coming up with new ideas, only trying to get out as much art as possible so they could get more stars. And when the stars finally ran out, some of the kids gave up on drawing altogether, even though they had loved it beforehand. You see, when they started wanting the reward, it replaced the excitement from drawing. And after the stars disappeared, their love for art did too. So when you attach rewards to your passions, you can sometimes forget why you cared about it in the first place, until you just completely stop enjoying it altogether. A wire is connected to a drone which flies up into the thunderstorm. As the air gets charged with electricity from the storm, a switch is flipped, sending thousands of volts through the wire. This triggers a lightning strike, and when the lightning hits the drone's protective metal cage, it redirects the electricity into the wire. When it reaches the end of the line, it moves into the ground and away from buildings, protecting the city from dangerous lightning strikes. Face the wall, take 2 steps back, put your head against the wall, grab the chair, and try to stand up. If you're a man, this is most likely impossible, and if you're a woman, it should be a breeze. You see, if you have bigger feet, those 2 steps at the beginning will be larger, moving you farther from the wall. And if your torso is longer, your center of gravity sits around your chest, which is why men just end up headbutting the wall. But women usually have smaller feet, so they stand closer to the wall, and their center of gravity is around their hips, allowing them to stand up easily. He started to fill his own restaurant with water, completely flooding it. You see, the building sat right on the riverbank, and when the river spilled over, dirty floodwater full of mud and debris would surge inside. But by pumping in clean water first, the weight pushes the walls from the inside, as the floodwater pushes from the outside. This creates a seal and stops the dirty floodwater from rushing in. And when the storm passed, he would just pump the water back out and dry it, reducing damage and saving him thousands. He left the water bottle on his seat, but as the sunlight reached it, it hit the bottle at just the right angle, and when the light passed through the water, it came out the other side as a focused beam. This concentrated the light, causing the seat to burn, and the man only noticed when he saw the smoke, meaning you should never leave bottled water in the sun. A black bear ripped straight through the fabric of the Boy Scouts' tent and dragged the boy out onto the ground. The bear scratched at him as it pulled, with its teeth digging into his body, but he curled into a tight ball, playing dead. Behind him, the scout leader banged pots together and flashed headlights to scare the bear away. Finally, it let go and stumbled off into the trees. The boy had deep scratches and bruises, but playing dead kept him alive. Holding nothing but a cane, the man looks like he's floating. But if you take this trick apart, you'll see there's actually a strong metal frame sitting on the ground. And attached to this is a short rod. The frame is covered with a cloth, and the rod sticks up, allowing the performer to place the cane on top, which has a special arm attached. This is threaded through the sleeve of the performer's jacket before he attaches a solid steel platform to the arm. And when he sits on it, he slips the platform into the seat of his pants before slipping his arm through the jacket, covering the entire structure, which is fully supporting his weight. He crawled inside the dinosaur statue, but as he did, he slipped, falling headfirst into its leg. He struggled to get out, but he was stuck upside down, and he slowly suffocated inside. It was only 2 days later that people noticed a bad smell, and when they peeked through a crack, they saw the man's dead body. Rescuers had to cut the leg open to pull him out, but no one knows for sure why he was in there. You would wear a clear plastic dome over your head while running, and inside, small plants sit mounted around the rim, while microphones and speakers allow you to talk through the dome. As you breathe, the plants absorb your carbon dioxide and release oxygen back into the helmet. Now, this was designed to work as a tiny greenhouse to recycle your breath, but the few plants inside can't make enough oxygen to replace what you're breathing, and the sealed dome would just fog up, while any movement could cause the plants to fall on your face, meaning it was never made. They threw a live grenade into the field where they were training, but their dog thought it was just another game of catch. He ran into the field, picking it up in his mouth. They screamed and waved their arms, desperately trying to stop the dog as it raced towards them. They threw rocks at him to scare him off. He paused, confused, tail still wagging. Then the grenade exploded. The dog was blown to pieces right in front of them. As the plane climbs higher, the air inside your body pushes against your eardrums until it feels like they're about to burst. That's because the pressure outside drops fast, and this affects the pocket of air behind your eardrum, causing a pressure difference that stretches it outwards. But before it does actually burst, a tube connected to your throat balances the pressure by releasing air with a pop. And when you go lower, your eardrum is pushed inwards until the tube pops air back in. While hiking, the boy began pointing at the air, saying he saw snowmen and Kermit the Frog. His dad tried to get him to focus, but he turned and walked toward the edge of a cliff, falling 120 feet into the rocks below. You see, his brain wasn't getting enough oxygen in the thin air, and this caused him to hallucinate. His dad stayed with him for 6 hours as rescue teams worked to reach them. The fall broke several bones and gave him a serious head injury, but somehow he survived. If you say a curse word, your parrot could repeat the word back perfectly. And if it escapes, it could teach other birds the curse word. You see, parrots naturally copy the sounds they hear the most. And in the wild, showing off new calls makes them seem smarter. Soon, other birds will quickly copy the words and even teach them to their babies, meaning entire flocks might end up learning your favorite curse word. As she yawned, the round end of her jawbone slid out of its socket, and the muscles around it pulled tight but couldn't push the bone back in place, leaving her jaw stuck wide open. At the hospital, doctors took x-rays and saw the joint was dislocated. She waited for hours, jaw still hanging open, until they finally sedated her. Then 4 doctors pushed and pulled until the bone finally popped back into its socket. They lit the fluid pouring from the cannon, which blasted liquid fire toward the enemy ship. But as they threw water on it, the flames only got bigger. You see, Greek fire stuck to anything it landed on, and it could even burn on the sea. So they launched jars of it at other ships and even pumped it through small hoses like flamethrowers. And the recipe was so secret that legend says when a man tried to leak it, he burst into flames and died. To this day, we still don't know how it was made. As he reached for his next move, he was actually waiting for a signal from his teammate. You see, one player outside used a computer to find the best moves. He sent them as coded numbers by text, and another player inside received the messages. Now, each table in the hall represented a square on the chessboard. So when the message came through, another player would go sit at that table that matched the square, secretly showing the move to the player without saying a word. At first, their results looked like genius, but once investigators found the texts, all of the cheaters were suspended. As she cries, her tears fall down into the tube and are dropped into the gun. When she turns the valve, a CO2 canister releases gas, freezing the tears into tiny balls of ice. And when the trigger is pulled, a spring would shoot the tear bullets like an actual gun. You see, a while back, she had a stressful meeting with her mentor, and she burst out crying. And she was so upset that she wished she could shoot him with her tears. So she designed this tear gun, and when it was finished, the mentor agreed to let her shoot him. They bolted the metal feet under the building, then made them walk with hydraulic tubes. Half the feet would lift, while the other half would slide forward, moving the whole thing inch by inch. You see, a new mall was supposed to replace this old school building, but instead of demolishing it, they just made it walk around the corner. And after 18 days and 200 feet of walking, it came to rest in its new location. If you travel to the very edge of the universe, throw a spear into it, and it passes through, then it didn't actually hit the boundary. It just moved into more space. This means the universe must not actually end at the edge. It must be bigger. But if you throw the spear and it bounces off, well, that means that there still has to be something on the other side to block it. And something isn't nothing. Meaning, either way, the edge can't be the end, right? Well, this assumes that the universe has an actual edge, when in reality, space itself could just bend and warp around itself. Meaning, no matter how far you traveled, you just might never find an end to throw the spear at. He drove straight through the fence of the burning house before running inside to save the dog. Now, he came out triumphantly with the dog in his arms, but the neighbors who watched the scene just stood there, confused. This was because there was no fire, just a man who crashed his car and stole a dog. You see, it turns out he had taken a bunch of drugs beforehand, and this caused him to hallucinate, convincing him that his neighbor's house was on fire. They called the police and he was arrested. If a Tootsie Pop grew to the size of a bowling ball, you would need 4 friends licking non-stop for over 15 hours just to reach the center. Now, if it was the size of the Epcot ball at Disney World, you would need nearly 1,000 people, and they would have to crawl all over it, licking constantly for about 90 years to reach the center. But if it somehow grew to the size of Earth, all 8 billion people would have to lick for 5 million years just to get to the core. The soldier would inflate the balloon, and a plane would fly in low, catching the rope with a V-shaped hook, before suddenly flying upwards. This would yank the person off the ground at over 100 miles per hour, lifting the cable 500 feet into the air and escaping the enemy. The crew would reel them into the plane and fly away. As he cycled down the hill, he lifted up his feet from the pedals and leaned forward, raising his legs until he was lying flat on his bike seat. You see, when you ride a bike sitting up straight, the air in front of you pushes against your body, making it harder to move forward. But by stretching out his body, he could cut down the amount of air resistance pressing him back, letting gravity pull him down the hill as he glided past the other cyclist without breaking a sweat. Water was poured into the first chamber, and it flowed into the second one. This lifted a cork float, which was attached to a metal rod. And as it lifted the rod, a hand pointed at lines which were carved along a large cylinder. Now each line marked 1 hour, and over the course of a day, it rose all the way up, counting 24 hours. When it reached the top, a siphon emptied the water chamber, resetting the clock. The dumped out water fell into a water wheel, which turned a series of gears, and this rotated the cylinder on top of the clock at the end of each day. Even though the days grew longer in summer, the Greeks still only counted 12 hours of daylight. So the markings on the cylinder changed to make the daytime hours longer, allowing it to tell time in every season. As it approaches a red light, the small device on top will turn on, sending beams of infrared light forward, which instantly turns the light green. But one man got sick of waiting in traffic and somehow got his hand on one, using it to clear the roads as he sped through town. Now, you can actually own one of these devices, but it's illegal to use them unless you're a firefighter. So police eventually got suspicious of the randomly changing lights and caught him red-handed. A man pointed a gun at her. She was shoved into a car, driven away, and tied tightly to a chair. Then she overheard a phone call where her husband told the men to kill her. But they decided not to, and secretly freed her instead while still collecting their money. Returning home days later, she watched as her family left her house mourning her death. Then she surprised her husband, who thought she was dead. Immediately, he begged for forgiveness, but police recorded his confession and now he's serving years in prison. If you cut off your finger, some people think they should put it in their mouth to keep it wet. But your mouth is filled with bacteria that cause infection. Others think they should put it directly onto ice to preserve it. But the freezing temperatures destroy delicate tissues, making reattachment impossible. And if you try taping it back on yourself, there's no blood flow, so the finger would quickly die. The best thing is to wrap it gently, keep it cool, and rush to a hospital. The clams are dropped into a water tank with their shells wide open, but the moment contaminated water flows in, they slam shut all at once. You see, in the wild, clams pull water through their bodies to eat tiny bits of food floating inside. But if the water is too dirty, they instantly close to protect themselves. So scientists attach a small piece of metal to each clam's shell, and when the clam shuts, the metal taps a sensor, and that triggers a warning. This method is used to monitor the water supply for contamination, and as long as their shells stay open, the water is safe to drink. A spoonful of ashes is taken from the body and sent to the lab. It's sifted to remove any big chunks, then cooked at over 2,800 degrees, turning the ash into carbon. Finally, the powder is spun at high speeds to separate the larger particles, and this is done 3 times until only the smallest particles remain. This fine powder is mixed into a pot of tattoo ink, and the tattoo artist uses this to line, shade, and color as normal, leaving you with a permanent design that contains a literal piece of someone you loved. Catch the wasp and place it in the freezer. Once it stops moving, tie a tiny string around its body and slowly warm it to wake it up. Then it will fly around like a tiny pet on a leash. Now repeat this process 100 more times to create a flying wasp army. They'll protect you by stinging anything that comes your way, but they could also just as easily turn on you. He stepped into the trap, and it snapped shut on his leg. He tried to pry it off, but for the next few days, it remained stuck. Finally, the hunter who set the trap found him and let him go. But instead of helping, he just walked away. The man was too injured to move and was stranded with no phone. For 10 days, he tried to crawl back, eating bugs and drinking from a spring just to survive. 2 weeks later, a fisherman finally heard his cries, and even though he had lost 30 pounds and had a rotting foot, he did survive. A stray bullet was shot towards his house and tore through his wall as it headed straight for his chest, but it slammed into his brand new copy of the Elder Scrolls anthology. The thick case cracked and the discs shattered, but its energy was absorbed layer by layer. And by the time it reached halfway through, the bullet was stopped and buried deep inside, saving his life. If you fart inside a spacesuit, you might think it would have a special vent to let it out. But the base layer of the suit is airtight, meaning it traps everything inside, including smells. Now, it does have a system that pulls in bad air, like your fart, and traps them in special filters. But it doesn't make the smell go away, meaning for a few minutes, you're just stuck, floating in space, breathing in your own fart. The boy dove into the flooded ditch for fun. As he jumped in, the water suddenly sucked him into the drain, dragging him in 30 feet. When rescuers searched, there was no sign of him, until one of them spotted fingers poking out through a manhole. You see, as the boy was pulled through the drain, he had somehow grabbed hold of a ladder, and a tiny air pocket under the lid allowed him to breathe. He stuck his fingers out of the manhole cover, and when they pried it open, he made it out, soaking wet but alive.
কবিতা লিখতে হইব কয় লাইন লেখছস দে নালে কিন্তু আমি তোকে পিটা মুতে তাদের
লাগবে হইব না ভাই এটা স্যার আপনি যেটা কইবেন এটা করব কোন খুন খারাপই করে লিখুন কবিতা লিখতে পারবো না
কোনো মাপ নাই
এটা পয়রে আপনার প্রেমে পুরো রূপ করে পড়ে যাবো আর তোর আপনি পারবেন ভাই আপনি পারবেন
এত কিছু ফালানোর সিস্টেম জানোস আর প্রেমে ফালানোর সিস্টেম জানোস না কথা তো একেবারে ফালায় দেওয়ার মতো না আগে যদি তোরা গুলিও করস আগে সালামটা দিয়ে নে
আপনার ছেলেকে আমার এত পছন্দ হয়েছে যে আমি তো বিয়েতে রাজি হয়ে গেছি
বছরও পড়বো না
আমি তোমাকে চ্যালেঞ্জ দিলাম তুমি যদি 7
মাস্তানি মুস্তানি অপরাধ এই 7 দিন খালি খাবি আর
এরকম পট্টি দিয়ে রাখছস কেন
আমি চাই এই মহৎ কাজটার সাথে আপনি থাকেন আমাদেরকে একশো
দুনিয়ার হাসা বাড়া হ্যাঁ আরে বেটা বড় ভাইয়ের মতো একটা বড় ভাই মানে টুকু
কিন্তু ছাপাই না সব মাথার ভিতরে থাকে যখন পড়তে ইচ্ছা করে মাথা আমি জানো ওরে বাপ করে দেবো আর আমি কি কমো জানো তবু তানিয়া ভালো কেমন বেটা কস না কেন বেটা
তোমার আমি আসো তুমি গাও দে আচর করে বুঝতেছ
গর্জন করলেই সবকিছু অর্জন হয় না বুঝছো
তানিয়া শুধু ভাত কেন
আসতে বলুন না সেটা আমার একটু জরুরি কথা আছে
বাবা
ভাই
আমি তো এলাকা ছাড়ার আগে
তুমি একটা গিরাট টুকরা ছেলে যেই ছেলে তানিয়া আমার পিস্তলটা নিয়ে আয় তো
কাকা দুধটা কাকা কি দুধটা রাইখে গেলাম
মাত্র সে ফেসবুকে স্ট্যাটাস দিয়েছে সে একটি অনাথ বাচ্চাকে
কত স্যাক্রিফাইস করছি এলাকার বড় ভাই থেকে রিক্সা চালক হয়ে গেলাম আর সেইটাই করবো যে গরম না, আর এই বড় ভাই তোর মায়ের চিকিৎসার দায়িত্ব নিছে। সেলিম ভাই ভালোবাসার লেগে জেল খাটছিল।
ভাই আপনি যত কথাই
এই বাড়িতে ওই বদমাইশটার কথা একবারও ভুলে উচ্চারণ করবা না।
ভাই মিনিমাম আপনি 17 লাইনের একটা কবিতা লেখেন। 17 লাইনের কবিতা
কিন্তু ছাপাই না, সব মাথার ভিতরে থাকে। যখন পড়তে ইচ্ছা করে মাথা আমি জানো ওরে বাপ করে দিই। আর আমি কি কমু জানো? তবু তানিয়া ভালো কেমন বেটা কস না কেন ক বেটা।
এটা পড়ে আপনার প্রেমে পুরো রূপ করে পড়ে যাবো গা। আর উত্তর আপনি পারবেন ভাই, আপনি পারবেন।
ও 700 লাইন লিখবো, আর বাদ বাকি 300 লাইন আমি লেখা বললাম।
একটু নামিয়ে দাও। মানে ও ছাড়া পাক না পাক তাতে আমাদের কি?
চুপ, একদম চুপ, 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 একদম চুপ। ওর প্রেমে তো মায়া পড়বই পড়বো, মায়ের মায়া পড়বো। দূরে দূরে থাকে, খাঁচায় ধরা দেয় না। বাবা আপনি মহান বাবা।
আচ্ছা আপনার কি মনে হয় না যে আপনি যাকে ভালোবাসেন, আপনি যে মেয়েটাকে এত ভালোবাসেন,
আমি তোর ভাবির বাসার সামনে তুই তাড়াতাড়ি লাগা দে, তাবিজে লাগা দে।
আপনাদের তো চিনলাম না। আমার বড় বোনের যে দেবরগুলো আছেন তো সবাইকেই চিনি, বাট আপনাদেরকে তো চিনি না।
যাইতে দে, তাহলে আমার খালা লাগে। ভাই বলতা ভালোবাসা যে এত প্যারা, এত কষ্ট, এত জ্বালা যন্ত্রণা জানলে ভালোই বাসতাম। জিসান আর তুলির ভালোবাসার ইতিহাস তাই রক্ত লাগবে।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম দুলা ভাই।
আরে শালা, ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম। কি খবর, কেমন আছো?
গলায় দড়ি লাগাই দিছে ভাবি।
গলায় দড়ি দিছি মানে গলায় 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 কেন রেখেছেন আমাকে?